The great thing about John Ashley is that unlike so many other actors who were involved in 1950s B films and exploitation movies, he was almost like the anointed prince. He became a star immediately, stayed a star, and then when his career faded as an actor, became one of the most successful producers on television. And not everybody's career had that trajectory. John Ashley was from Oklahoma. He was actually the adopted son of a very prominent doctor. As a teenager, he was on vacation in California with friends, and they ended up on the set of the John Wayne movie, The Conqueror. It's directed by Dick Powell. And John Wayne sees John Ashley and kind of notices that, this kid kind of looks like Elvis, and he's got that little bit of the snarl and all that stuff. And John Wayne recommends John Ashley to a casting director who worked for William Castle. And so William Castle hires John Ashley to be on his now pretty much forgotten television show, Men of Annapolis. So he was doing Men of Annapolis and kind of cranking along there a little bit, goes to meet a girlfriend who has an appointment at American International. And Lou Rusoff, who was writing so many of AIP's movies, he was working a great deal with Alex Gordon, he sees John Ashley and says, "Oh, this is exactly who we need for Hot Rod Gang." They throw John Ashley right into the deep end of the pool immediately, and he clicks. He's good looking, and he was always kind of playing the swaggering bad guy. He did the same thing in Motorcycle Gang, which is wonderful for many reasons, primarily because everybody in the Motorcycle Gang wears a helmet. And so the outlaw image isn't really there too much. But John Ashley could also sing. So he started to record some records. And in fact, at one point, they were seriously considering him as the lead for I Was a Teenage Werewolf. That obviously did not happen. It went to Michael Landon. But producer Herman Cohen, who knew Ashley sang, and he had some records that were coming out on Dot Records, said, "I will find something for you." So hence, John Ashley, with only a few movies behind him, suddenly has a cameo in How to Make a Monster as himself, recording the Red Wine classic, You Gotta Have EU. And he's dancing away there with the girls and all that. And this is, John Ashley is the image of the new Hollywood that the new execs at the studio are trying to put forth. And that makes Robert Harris go crazy and send the Teenage Frankenstein and Teenage Werewolf after to kill them. John Ashley really was a member of the AIP stable, very firmly entrenched at that company. He married an AIP starlet, Deborah Wally. And when they moved into the Beach Party films, it was a little incongruous, and he and Frankie Avalon, because John was usually always playing his buddy, had this kind of running joke about the fact that they were in their 30s and they were playing these teenagers. And Frankie Avalon already had kids, and and so it's like, hey, we're all these married guys, and they are trying to pawn us off as 17 years old. But he was, at that point, he was a star, but he was kind of a little bit of a second banana, but he was having an impact. The thing was that during all this time, he was also doing episodic television. So he was doing Death Valley Days, and he was on his own series called Straight Away. Incongruously, in the middle of all of this work, especially because he was so prominent at AIP, John Ashley is cast in HUD with Paul Newman and Brandon DeWilde and Melvin Douglas and Patricia Neal. Ashley has very prominent billing in this film, but his part is almost exclusively limited to one dialogue scene with Brandon DeWilde. He plays a guy who's going to enter the rodeo. He talks to Brandon DeWilde, says, "Aren't you going to come on and be part of the rodeo?" And Brandon DeWilde says, "No, I don't want to get my stomach stepped on." John Ashley's career in the Philippines really started in kind of a slightly backwards way. During his period at AIP, he was always very smart with money. He had returned to Oklahoma and was buying theaters. So while he was in front of the camera for How to Stuff a Wild Bikini, he was already acquiring real estate in his home state. A few years after the Beach Party movies, his marriage began to disintegrate, and he and Deborah Wally were negotiating a divorce. And he got the offer to go to the Philippines to make a movie with the director Eddie Romero. Eddie Romero was associated with a company called Hemisphere Pictures, and he had done a film with Francis Lee Darragh that had been distributed in this country known as Terror is a Man, which really is very much like The Island of Dr. Moreau, with this man who's been having blood transfusions and turns into this animal-like creature, kind of a cat. And Eddie Romero was really a very prominent guy in the Philippines, and certainly was very prominent and well known for making exploitation pictures. So John Ashley goes to the Philippines to make Mad Doctor of Blood Island for Hemisphere Pictures. He kind of looked at it as a vacation. It ended up taking rather a long time, but he loved the Philippines. He bought a little condominium there, and he said, oh, this is great. He was very impressed with the crews and kind of just the way and the ease in which the movies were being made. They seemed a little informal, but he appreciated that, and he liked that, and he liked that approach. And he came back to Oklahoma and discovered that so many months later that his little movie he had been in that he had almost completely forgotten about, suddenly this film is playing in drive-ins and is making money. So they say, oh, John, please come back to the Philippines. So John Ashley goes back to the Philippines, also working with Eddie Romero, and he does Beast of Blood and Brides of Blood. But at this point, the picture started running a little short on budgets, and John Ashley said, well, why don't I put in the money? He was starring in the films. He was becoming a cult figure with horror movies. He loved the production personnel. So suddenly he kind of, because they ran short of funds, he ends up making up the rest of the budget, and boom, suddenly he is a producer. Now, of course, he has been around movie sets now for 10, 15 years. He absorbed a lot, was a smart guy, kind of knew the way things should go. So he relocated for about, as he said, about six months out of the year to the Philippines to continue making movies. And it's interesting that John Ashley says, well, where he feels they made their mistake was they expanded too far. And they did a movie called Beyond Atlantis, co-starring with Pat Wayne. And what they had decided to do was something that was PG rated, rather than all the R rated with gore and, the nudity and stuff that had marked the other films. And the scope of the movie was much larger, multiple locations, underwater photography, all kinds of things that had not been present in the other movies, and it bombed. And John Ashley was like, this thing should have worked, except we exceeded, if you will, the parameters of our own formula, which is kind of the classic thing that often happens. It happened at Canon Films. It happened with so many production companies that we could name, where they're successful in a niche, but then breaking through that ceiling into what either a larger forum or bigger movies. And Beyond Atlantis was not like a major studio production, but it was beyond the production reach of what John Ashley had set up. John Ashley, it's kind of funny, after Beyond Atlantis, which we shouldn't have gone that far over our budget, everything else gets involved with Apocalypse Now, which, ends up at the time being one of the most expensive movies ever made, but, of course, also one of the most successful and, a masterwork. But he got involved with television, and that's when he really began his uber successful career as a producer for Stephen J. Cannell. And suddenly a script drops on John Ashley's desk, The A-Team. Go shoot a pilot in Mexico. You know about foreign crews and foreign financing, so we trust you to bring it in under budget and all that stuff. So he goes down there and he does this thing, and really nobody even knows what in the world they had, but he had a sense that something really was going to click. And of course it became this gigantic hit. And he remained in television for the rest of his career, so successful. And we get really one of the most sought after showrunners, not only because he could run a TV show efficiently, but he knew all the nuts and bolts. But beyond that, as he said, he loved finding kind of young kids like he had been at AIP in the 1950s. He kind of brought it back to that.